She dove into the river to pull out the drowning boy, not knowing his dad is a mafia boss. The scream hit first, then the splash. One heartbeat later, Lena Moretti was in the icy river, fighting the current with a child's lifeless body in her arms. But as black SUVs skidded to a stop on the bridge and armed men closed in, a tall figure stepped out. The kind of man people only mentioned in whispers. The boy coughed, gasped, and cried, "Papa." That's when Lena realized she hadn't just saved a child. She'd just been claimed by the Mafia. The story doesn't end here. Subscribe to Mafia Soul to see what happened next, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Every view keeps these stories alive. The frigid water of the Arno bit into Lena Moretti's skin like broken glass as she hit the surface. She didn't remember deciding to jump. Only the echo of a child's scream slicing through the morning air and the flash of a small blue jacket tumbling into the river. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. The world above vanished, replaced by the rush of current, the sting of cold, and the muffled thud of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She'd been late for work again, a double shift at Gallows Diner, the same one she'd been doing for 3 years to keep rent paid and dreams half alive. Her manager's warning still rang in her head. One more tardy and you're done. But none of that mattered now. Not the unpaid bills stacked on her nightstand. Not the hole in her worn shoes. Not the ache that lived permanently in her shoulders from carrying trays for tips. All that mattered were the tiny hands she'd seen slip beneath the black water. Lena kicked hard, fighting the current, her lungs burning. Through the blur, she spotted the boy sinking, bubbles rising from his parted lips. She lunged forward, arms slicing through the current, the cold stealing every ounce of strength she had. Her fingers brushed fabric, then caught. "I've got you," she gasped, pulling him tight against her. His body was light, frighteningly limp. By the time she broke the surface, her chest was screaming for air. She coughed, kicked, and clawed her way to the embankment, where a few stunned bystanders stood frozen. Someone yelled for help, another dialed emergency services. No one moved until she dragged the child onto the slick stone. "Come on, sweetheart," Lena whispered, pressing her palms against his chest. 1, 2, 3. She breathed into his mouth, praying for movement. "Don't you quit on me." For a moment, there was nothing, and then a sharp cough. Water spilled from his lips, followed by a desperate sob. Lena laughed through tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You're okay. You're safe now." The boy couldn't have been more than 5. His hair was dark, plastered to his forehead, his lips pale from the cold. He blinked up at her with wide brown eyes, confused but alive. Sirens screamed in the distance, growing louder. A bright yellow ambulance skidded to a halt, its lights flashing against the mist. And then came the sound that didn't belong, the low rumble of engines too expensive for this street. Black SUVs lined the bridge, doors flinging open in near unison. Men in suits spilled out, their movements sharp, practiced, and dangerous. One of them barked orders into a radio, while another threw a long coat over the shivering boy. Lena froze, still kneeling in the puddle beside him, unsure what she'd stepped into. The man who emerged last made everything around him stop. Tall, composed, the kind of presence that made space bend. His dark hair was slicked back, his jaw marked by a single scar, his suit immaculate even in the rain. He dropped to one knee beside child. "Matteo," he said softly, his voice breaking for half a heartbeat before it hardened again. He gathered the boy into his arms with a tenderness that didn't fit the menace surrounding him. The boy clung to him weakly. "Papa." Then the man looked up. His gaze met Lena's, and in that instant, the world tilted. It wasn't gratitude in his eyes. It was calculation. He took in every detail of her, the trembling hands, the soaked hair, the cracked fingernails. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Lena opened her mouth, but the answer caught in her throat. The paramedics moved in, lifting Matteo onto a stretcher. The man stood, towering over her, rain sliding down his face without him seeming to notice. "You saved my son," he said, voice low. It should have sounded like thanks. It didn't. She watched as the SUVs pulled away, taillights vanishing into the fog. The only thing left was the echo of that man's voice, smooth, controlled, and edged with danger. Lena sat back on the pavement, shaking, staring at her trembling hands. She told herself she'd just done what anyone would do. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. She also knew, though she couldn't explain why, that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't begin to understand. By morning, the river had become a headline. Local hero saves child from near death. Beneath it, a blurry photograph captured Lena kneeling by the boy's side, her hair soaked, her face pale but determined. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Co-workers, old classmates, even her landlord sent messages filled with exclamation points and disbelief. One read simply, "That's you on Channel 7, right?" Lena turned the volume down and closed the cracked phone screen with a shaky hand. The apartment was still dark except for the weak dawn light pressing through thin curtains. The smell of yesterday's coffee lingered in the air. For a long moment, she sat on the edge of her bed, listening to the city come alive below. Horns, sirens, someone shouting for a cab. She'd gone to sleep, expecting exhaustion to drown out the memory of the river. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw his small face again, the boy's lashes heavy with water, the faint pulse under her fingers, the sharpness of the man's gaze as he took his son away. Now everyone knew. By the time she reached Gallows Diner, the morning rush had already begun. The bell above the door jingled as she stepped inside, still pulling her apron over her uniform. Conversations stopped for a beat before resuming in low murmurs. "There she is, our river angel," called Marcy from behind the counter, grinning as she flipped pancakes. "Hero of the week." Lena forced a smile. "Don't start. You're all over the news, Lena," another waitress said, sliding past her with a tray of coffee mugs. "You look good on camera." "Yeah, wet and half drowned." "Great look." The regulars at the corner booth, 3 construction workers who came in every morning, lifted their cups when she passed. "To the bravest waitress in the city," one of them cheered. She laughed weakly, cheeks burning. The sound of her name bouncing off the walls felt wrong, too loud for the little life she'd built around invisibility. As she poured coffee, she caught sight of a man sitting alone near the window. Dark suit. No breakfast, no coffee. Just watching. When she looked directly at him, he lowered his gaze and stepped outside, disappearing into the drizzle. A nervous chill crawled up her spine. That night, she left work late. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflecting the glow of streetlights. Her shoes slapped softly against the wet pavement as she turned into the narrow alley leading to her apartment. She paused halfway down. Someone was behind her, not close, but steady. The sound of a shoe brushing against grit. She turned sharply. The alley was empty except for puddles and shadows. "Get a grip," she whispered to herself, clutching her keys tighter. Still, she walked the rest of the way fast, her heart hammering until she locked her door behind her. Inside, silence. The thin walls hummed faintly with her neighbor's TV. She leaned against the door and took a slow breath. Her gaze drifted to the small framed photo on the shelf. Her mother, smiling at the seaside, wind in her hair. "Do the right thing," her mother used to say, "even when nobody sees it." Well, they'd seen it now. All of them. And she wasn't sure it felt right anymore. Lena set a pot of water to boil, the ritual steadying her hands. Then she opened her worn journal, the one she'd started after her mother died. The pages were filled with small moments. Grocery lists, diner shifts, sketches of people she'd served. Tonight, she wrote one line. "I think I saved a child who belonged to someone dangerous." She stopped, the weight of those words sinking in. Across town, inside a building wrapped in tinted glass and marble floors, Viktor Romano stood before a bank of security monitors. The footage replayed in silence. The bridge, the panic, the blur of Lena's dive into the water. "Every camera on that street caught her," said a man beside him, thin and nervous in a tailored suit. Facial recognitions already picked up her name. Lena Moretti, waitress, lives alone, no family. Victor's jaw flexed. On the screen, he watched Lena press her hands to his son's chest, her expression focused, desperate. "She's brave," he said quietly. "She's a vulnerability," his advisor replied. Torino's men already saw the footage. "They'll use her. They'll think she's under my protection," Victor interrupted, his voice low and final. The advisor hesitated. "That's not usually how you handle civilians." Victor's eyes never left the screen. "She saved my boy. That makes her mine to protect." He pressed a button, freezing the frame on Lena's face, half-shadowed, wet hair clinging to her cheek. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his features. Back in her apartment, Lena turned off the lights and sank into bed. Sleep came in fragments, headlights flashing through the blinds, the hum of traffic, the ghost of cold water clinging to her skin. When she finally stirred near dawn, the room was pale blue with early light. She stumbled to the door for the morning paper, and her heart stopped. A single white card lay on the floor just inside the threshold, slipped under the door during the night. The cardstock was heavy, smooth. Embossed in gold were the letters. VR. Below it, handwritten in dark ink. "Dinner. Tomorrow. 8 p.m. Lena's breath caught. She looked at the door, half expecting to see a shadow outside. But the hallway was empty. She turned the card over once, twice, feeling its weight, its quiet promise, and its warning. Her life, once small and ordinary, had already begun to unravel. And somehow, she knew this was only the beginning. The restaurant looked nothing like the kind of place Lena Moretti ever walked into. Crystal light dripped from chandeliers, glinting off mirrored walls and glasses, so thin they looked like air. The kind of place where people didn't pay with crumpled bills and waiters moved like ghosts. She hesitated in the doorway, still damp from the drizzle outside. Her thrift store dress clung to her knees, and her coat, 2 winters old, looked painfully out of place among silk scarves and diamond earrings. A host approached, expression polite but questioning. Before she could stammer out Victor's name, he nodded once, as if she'd been expected. "Right this way, Ms. Moretti." She followed through a maze of tables to a quiet corner overlooking the river. And there he was. Viktor Romano didn't rise right away. He sat with his back to the city lights, a half-full glass of dark wine resting in his hand. His tailored suit caught the glow of the candles, the faintest sheen of expensive fabric moving when he finally stood. "Ms. Moretti," he said, his voice low, smooth as glass. "You came." Lena's throat tightened. "You left a card under my door." That didn't exactly feel like an invitation. He smiled faintly, gesturing for her to sit. "It was a request. I'm glad you accepted it." Every inch of the table was perfectly arranged. 2 plates, folded napkins, a small vase with white lilies. She sat gingerly, tried to remember how to breathe. "So," she said, breaking the silence, "is this dinner or an interrogation? Can it not be both?" The waiter appeared out of nowhere, pouring wine into her glass. Victor spoke briefly in Italian, too fast for her to follow, but his tone was soft, intimate, as if the language itself obeyed him. She glanced around, lowering her voice. "You don't have to bribe me for saving your son." "I don't bribe people," Victor said. "I show appreciation. Matteo is safe because of you." Hearing the boy's name steadied her. "How is he?" "Recovering. He asks about you often. Says you swim fast." A flicker of warmth touched his eyes before it vanished behind calm detachment. "He'd like to thank you himself one day." Lena relaxed a little, though her pulse refused to slow. "That's good. I was worried." "You worry too easily. Maybe you don't worry enough." The air between them shifted, a subtle tightening. Somewhere beneath the polite tone, an invisible current hummed, something she couldn't name but could feel all the same. "So," she said, forcing a smile, "what exactly do you do, Mr. Romano, besides own too many black cars?" He tilted his head, amused. "You already know. Actually, I don't." He leaned forward slightly. "You've lived in this city long enough, Ms. Moretti. You've heard names whispered in alleys. You've seen doors people don't knock on. You understand power, even if you pretend not to." She stared at him. "You're telling me you're one of those people. I'm telling you that in my world, debts are honored. Loyalty is absolute, and betrayal is—" His pause was deliberate. "Unwise." Her stomach turned. "Are you threatening me or thanking me?" He smiled, just enough to show it wasn't an answer. "Both, maybe." She exhaled shakily, sitting back in her chair. "You don't have to protect me. Whatever this is, I don't want to be part of it." He considered her, silent for a long moment. Then, softly, "You stepped into my world the moment you touched my son. There is no going back." The words hit like cold water. She wanted to stand, to leave, but her body wouldn't move. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Viktor said simply. "For now." He took a slow sip of wine, his eyes never leaving hers. "I wanted to see the woman who didn't hesitate. The woman who jumped without thinking. Most people would have watched him drown. That's not bravery," she said. "That's instinct. It's the rarest kind," he murmured. Their gazes locked across the table. The noise of the restaurant faded until only the river remained, a dark ribbon moving outside the glass, glimmering under the city's reflection. Something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't trust. It wasn't exactly fear either. It was recognition. Two lives colliding, hers ruled by struggle, his by control, and somewhere in the crash, a strange, magnetic pull neither could explain. When the waiter brought their meals, neither touched the food. Lena kept glancing toward the door, calculating how long it would take to walk out. Finally, she pushed her chair back. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Romano, but I don't belong in your world." Viktor rose with her, stepping closer than before, close enough that she could smell smoke and rain on his suit. "No," he said softly, "but the world doesn't care where you belong. It only cares what you've touched, and you touched what's mine." Her breath caught. He smiled, cold, flawless, and stepped aside, allowing her to leave. "Good night, Ms. Moretti." Outside, the air was sharp with river fog. Lena walked fast, her heels echoing off the wet pavement. Every step away from that place felt like surfacing for air after being underwater too long. She turned the corner, tightening her coat around her. The street was mostly empty until she noticed the headlights. A black car idled across from the bus stop. Its engine hummed low, steady. She quickened her pace, pretending not to notice. The car didn't move. When the bus finally arrived, she climbed on and took a seat near the back, glancing out the window as the city blurred by. The car pulled out, merging into traffic 2 vehicles behind. Lena swallowed hard, pulse thudding in her ears. This time, she knew it wasn't Viktor's man. This was something else, something that didn't feel like protection at all. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the fear, she felt a truth she couldn't ignore. Whatever world she'd stumbled into, she was already in too deep to get out. The first thing Lena noticed was that her door wasn't closed. She froze at the end of the hallway, heart hammering, the grocery bag cutting into her fingers. A faint draft slipped through the crack, carrying the smell of something metallic, paint, maybe, or blood. She nudged the door open with her elbow. The chain lock hung uselessly snapped. Inside, her small apartment was chaos. Drawers yanked open, cushions slashed, the few things she owned scattered like they'd been thrown in disgust. Then she saw it. On the far wall, drawn in dripping red paint, was a crude circle with a line slashed through the middle. The mark looked almost alive, the paint still wet enough to glisten under the weak light. Lena dropped the groceries, cans rolling across the floor. She backed out slowly, her breath shallow, her pulse roaring in her ears. She didn't need to understand the symbol to know it was a message. Her phone was dead. Her hands shook as she fumbled with the charger, but before she could plug it in, a shadow crossed her doorway. "Don't move," said a low voice. She spun around. Viktor stood there. No knock, no warning, just presence, dark coat, gloves, and eyes that burned with fury. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but it came out thin and useless. "I told you this would happen." He stepped past her, scanning the room. His jaw tightened when he saw the mark. Torino's men. "Ooh, a rival who wants what's mine." His tone sharpened. "Now he knows your name." "I don't even know who he is." Lena's voice cracked. "I'm nobody." "Why would?" "Because you saved my son," Viktor snapped. "Because they think hurting you will hurt me." Her knees nearly buckled. "This can't be real." "It is. And you're leaving." "I'm not." "You're leaving," he repeated, louder this time, pulling his phone from his coat. "Get 2 men here now. We move in 5 minutes." "I'm not your problem." "Viktor." He turned to her, anger flickering beneath control. "You can't control this. You can't control me." The air between them pulsed with tension, her defiance against his fury, both rooted in fear. "You think you have a choice," he said quietly. "If you stay here, you won't have a life to protect." Something in his voice, cold, final, made her stop fighting. She looked at the ruined wall again, the symbol bleeding down toward the floor. The reality of it sank in. Whoever had been inside her home hadn't come to scare her. They'd come to promise worse. "Where are you taking me?" she asked softly. "Somewhere safe," he said, and this time his voice gentled. "You'll understand when you see." The safe place turned out to be a glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city, the kind of home that didn't feel lived in, only guarded. Every surface gleamed. The air smelled faintly of money and disinfectant. It was beautiful, sterile, and suffocating all at once. Lena stood in the center of the room, clutching the strap of her bag like it was armor. "This isn't safety," she murmured. "This is a cage." Viktor didn't answer. He crossed the room to a side door and opened it. "Matteo," he called. The boy came running out, a blur of laughter and motion. His face lit up when he saw her. "You came," he shouted, flinging his arms around her waist. Lena's breath caught. "Hey, you," she said softly, kneeling to his level. "You look better." "I drawed you," Matteo said proudly, pointing toward a stack of papers on a nearby table. Her in stick figure form, arms outstretched in water. The sight of it, of his innocence still intact, hit harder than fear. She looked up at Viktor, whose expression had softened almost imperceptibly. For a fleeting moment, the world outside didn't exist. Then his phone buzzed. The softness vanished. "Stay here," he told her. "My men are downstairs. No one gets in without my word. And if I try to leave..." He looked back at her, voice low. "Don't." Later that night, Lena stood on the balcony. The city stretched below like a living circuit, lights pulsing in rhythm with her racing thoughts. Somewhere down there was the life she'd known. The diner, her co-workers, her apartment with the crooked picture frame and the smell of coffee. All of it felt impossibly far away. Now she was part of a story she hadn't asked to be written into, her freedom traded for safety she wasn't sure she wanted. The wind carried the faint echo of sirens from the streets below. She pressed her palms against the cold glass railing, staring down at the endless city lights. Somewhere out there, danger waited. But what terrified her most wasn't what lay beyond the penthouse walls. It was how a small part of her already felt safer inside them. Days slipped by in the penthouse like slow-moving clouds. Bright mornings, shadowed afternoons. Long nights heavy with thoughts she couldn't quiet. Lena's world had shrunk to glass walls and locked doors. But inside them, a new rhythm began to form. It started with Matteo. He followed her everywhere, small feet padding on marble floors, his voice bubbling with endless questions. Together, they read picture books she found stacked in the study, cooked simple meals in the oversized kitchen, and built towers of sugar packets that toppled over in laughter. For a while, it felt almost normal. Sometimes, Viktor would appear in the doorway, silent, watchful, unreadable. He never interrupted. He would stand just long enough to see Matteo smile, then disappear into his office again, where his voice turned to ice. From behind closed doors, Lena would hear fragments of that other life. The clipped tone of commands, men reporting movements at the docks, the sharp edge of words like shipment and territory. Then the door would open again, and he'd emerge as if he'd left the storm behind. Expression calm, voice steady, eyes soft when they found his son. That duality fascinated her. It terrified her too. One evening, the rain came hard, sheets of water striking the windows until the city outside was nothing but blurred lights and sound. Lena sat with Matteo on the couch, reading by the soft glow of a lamp, when the power flickered once and went out. The room sank into darkness. Matteo whimpered. "It's okay," she whispered, holding him close. "Just thunder." But her heart was beating too fast. The penthouse, usually humming with quiet luxury, now felt like a cage of shadows. Somewhere in the dark, she could almost sense the pulse of the city below, danger moving unseen. When Matteo finally drifted asleep, Lena went looking for Viktor. She found him on the balcony, a single candle flickering beside him, its light dancing over the hard lines of his face. He wasn't in his usual armor of composure. No jacket, no perfect posture. Just a man sitting in the dark, shoulders heavy, staring at the storm. "You shouldn't be out here," she said softly. He glanced back. "Neither should you." The lights went out. Matteo was scared. He nodded once. "I've sent men to fix it." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "You don't have to act like this doesn't affect you, you know? You look tired." A faint, humorless smile touched his lips. "Tired isn't something men like me can afford to be. Men like you, men with enemies, with blood on their hands." His gaze dropped to the candle, the flame trembling in the wind. "I didn't choose this life, Lena, but once you inherit it, there's no way out without destroying everything you love." She wanted to say she didn't believe him, that there was always a choice, but the truth was in his voice. Beneath the steel, there was grief. He looked at her then, eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. "You remind me what it means to protect something pure." The words hit something deep inside her. The air between them shifted, thickened. She could hear her own breath, the distant thunder, the candle's faint hiss. He reached out, a single, hesitant motion, brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek. His fingers lingered there for a heartbeat too long. Lena didn't move. Couldn't. The storm outside roared, the candlelight flickering across their faces. Their eyes met, and for a moment, it felt inevitable, the pull between fear and something far more dangerous. Then his phone rang. The sound shattered the silence like gunfire. Viktor exhaled sharply, stepping back. He answered with a curt, "What?" His voice hardened instantly, all softness gone. A pause. Then, "I'll handle it." He ended the call, jaw tight. "What happened?" Lena asked, pulse still uneven. "Torino made a move," he said, grabbing his coat from the chair. "Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone." She followed him to the threshold, the storm winds howling as he stepped out. "Viktor." He looked back once, eyes dark, unreadable. Locked the doors, and then he was gone. The next morning, sunlight poured through the glass, too bright, too ordinary. But the world outside had shifted again. Lena turned on the muted TV, her stomach twisting. Breaking news: gunfire erupts near the East Docks. Footage showed flashing lights, smoke, chaos. Her hands trembled as she pressed a palm to her mouth. Somewhere in that storm of violence, Viktor was fighting to keep his empire, and maybe, without meaning, to her. And all she could do was wait. The news spread through Viktor's organization like smoke, whispers that turn into questions, questions that turn into blame. Someone had leaked the routes for the Romano shipments at the docks. 3 trucks destroyed. 2 men dead. By the time Viktor's second-in-command, Rossi, entered his office, the air was already sharp with fury. "There's proof," Rossi said, laying a folder on the desk. Encrypted messages sent from her phone. Times matched the night she was alone here. Viktor's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes darkened. "You're saying Lena?" "I'm saying she's the only one who wasn't supposed to be here," Rossi said. "You let her in. Maybe she let someone else in too." The words hit harder than they should have. Viktor leaned back slowly, his jaw tightening. "Get her here." Rossi hesitated. "And if she denies it, she will," Viktor said quietly. "Bring her anyway." Lena entered the office with confusion shadowing her face. She just finished helping Matteo with his drawings when Viktor's men came for her, silent, stone-faced, refusing to answer why. Now she stood across from Viktor, the weight of his stare pressing down like a storm. "What's going on?" she asked. "Sit." His tone was calm, too calm. She didn't move. "You're scaring me." "Good," he said softly. "Maybe fear will make you honest." Her heart skipped. Honest about what? He opened the folder, spreading the papers across the table. Screenshots, timestamps, digital trails that meant nothing to her. "Someone sent details of my operations to Luciano, Torino. They came from your phone." She blinked, shaking her head. "That's impossible. I don't even know what half of that means." "Then how do you explain it?" "I can't. Because it's not me." The silence that followed was unbearable. His face was unreadable, carved in shadow. "Finally," he said, "you used me to get close." The words sliced through her. Her breath caught. "No, Viktor, no. I would never." "You think I don't know what desperation looks like," he snapped. "You needed money, a way out. You saw this, and thought you could survive off it." Tears burned behind her eyes. "You're wrong. I saved your son because he was drowning, not because of you. Everything I did after was because I trusted you." He turned away, as if the sight of her made it worse. "Please," she whispered, stepping closer. "Look at me. Tell me you don't believe this." For a moment, he did. And what she saw there, the war between trust and duty, broke her in a way the accusation hadn't. "I don't know what to believe," he said finally. That hurt more than any threat ever could. That night, she overheard them through the half-open door. Rossi's voice was low but sharp. "She's compromised. We move her to a secure location before Torino does. Or worse. Secure location sounded too much like disappears forever." Lena packed quietly, a small bag, her mother's photo, Matteo's drawings. The boy was asleep, his curls falling over his forehead, the faintest smile still on his lips. She couldn't leave him. Not here. Not with them. She wrapped him in a blanket and whispered, "We're going on a trip. Okay? Just for a little while." By the time the guards changed shifts, she was gone. Across the city, Viktor sat alone in his office, the same folder open before him. The candle from the night of the storm burned again, its flames small and steady. Rossi entered without knocking. "She's gone." Viktor didn't move. "There's more," Rossi said, setting down a new file. "We traced the data. The messages were routed through Torino's network. He planted them." The blood drained from Viktor's face. His hand clenched around the folder until the paper crumpled. "Find her," he said. His voice was quiet, but the room itself seemed to recoil. "Before Torino does." Lena found an old safe house on the edge of the city, one of those forgotten places between warehouses and abandoned lots. The walls smelled of damp and dust, but it was shelter. Matteo slept beside her on a thin mattress, his small hand gripping hers even in dreams. On the flickering TV across the room, the news anchor's voice trembled. "Gang war erupts across the East Docks. Romano and Torino families locked in violent conflict." She turned the volume down, the words still echoing in her head. The world outside was unraveling, and somewhere in that chaos, Viktor was fighting ghosts she didn't create. Lena pressed her hand to Mateo's hair, her tears falling silently onto the worn blanket. She had saved his son once. Now, she prayed she could save them both again. The city felt like it was holding its breath. By nightfall, every corner of Viktor Romano's empire was cracking. Safe houses emptied. Phones rang unanswered. Men who once swore loyalty whispered other names now. The quiet before the storm stretched too long, then broke. In the penthouse office that had once commanded fear, Viktor stood before a table scattered with maps, guns, and cell phones. Rain lashed the windows, lightning flashing across the skyline like warning shots. Rossi stood across from him, face pale. Torino's moving tonight. He's got half the port locked down. Our shipment's gone, and 3 of our crews switched sides. Let them, Viktor said, loading a magazine into his pistol. They chose their graves. Rossi hesitated. You can still walk away from this. Take the boy, the woman. Viktor's jaw tightened. And do what? Hide while Torino tears the city apart? No, this ends tonight. He holstered his gun, his movements precise, deliberate. For a moment, his mask slipped, just enough for Rossi to see the exhaustion beneath. Make sure Mateo stays off the grid. She's the only person I trust to keep him breathing. In a forgotten corner of the city, Lena crouched beside Mateo in the dim light of the safe house. The old building groaned under the storm's weight. Water dripped from a cracked ceiling. Remember what I told you? She whispered, brushing his hair back. Mateo nodded solemnly. Stay quiet. Stay low. That's right. She smiled faintly, though fear pressed against her chest like a physical thing. And no matter what happens, you don't open the door unless it's me. The boy's hand clutched hers, small and trembling. Is Papa coming? Her throat closed. He will, she lied. He always does. The thunder outside rolled closer, heavier. Down at the docks, the rain turned the concrete slick, the shadows alive with motion. Viktor's convoy pulled in, 5 SUVs in formation, engines rumbling low. Men stepped out, armed, faces grim. Torino's voice echoed from the far side of the pier, distorted by the storm. You should have stayed in your glass cage, Romano. Viktor stepped into the open, coat whipping in the wind. You talk too much, Luciano. The first bullet cut through the night like lightning. Then everything exploded. Gunfire roared. Sparks flew from metal. Viktor ducked behind a crate, returning fire in clean, efficient bursts. His men shouted over the storm. Bodies fell into the black water. Somewhere, someone screamed. They're inside the convoy. A blast tore through the air. One of the SUVs erupted in flames. The shockwave threw Viktor to the ground. His ears rang. Blood blurred his vision. Through the chaos, he saw one of Torino's men aiming for him. He fired first. The man dropped. For a moment, the world narrowed to gunfire, rain, and breath. Then, through the haze, Viktor's phone buzzed. He didn't think, just answered. Lena. Her voice cracked through the line, trembling. Viktor, what's happening? The news. Listen to me. His tone was calm. Even his gunfire screamed in the background. If I don't come back, tell Mateo. Don't say that. Tell him I try to be better. Viktor, please. He drew in a sharp breath, ducking behind another barricade. Lock the doors, Lena. Promise me. I promise. Static swallowed his reply. Then the line went dead. Lena stared at the phone, her reflection warped in the cracked screen. Outside, thunder rolled again, louder, closer, mingling with the distant echo of gunfire. She pressed a hand over her mouth, choking back a sob. Mateo stirred beside her in his sleep, murmuring for his father. She wanted to tell him everything was fine, that Viktor would walk through the door any minute, soaked but smiling. Instead, she held him tighter, rocking him gently as the rain drummed against the roof. Each flash of lightning illuminated her face, pale, streaked with tears. Each crack of thunder carried the rhythm of gunfire across the city. And as the storm raged on, she realized the truth that terrified her most. She hadn't just saved Victor's son. She'd given her heart to a man who might not live to see the morning. The storm broke just before dawn. For the first time in days, the city was quiet. Not peaceful, just emptied of noise. The rain had rinsed the streets clean, but the silence it left behind felt heavy, waiting. Inside the safe house, Lena sat by the window, clutching a chipped mug of cold tea. The room smelled of damp wood and sleepless nights. Mateo was curled up on a mattress behind her, his breathing soft, rhythmic, a small mercy in the wreckage of everything else. She hadn't slept. Every hour bled into the next, every car that passed outside, making her heart stop for just a second. The television flickered quietly in the background, looping the same blurred footage of burning cars and flashing sirens at the docks. Romano family conflict ends in fire and blood, the caption read. No mention of who survived. Lena turned the sound off and stared at the darkened screen, her reflection faint in the glass. She barely recognized the woman looking back, pale, hollow-eyed, stronger than she used to be, but too tired to feel it. Then 3 soft knocks on the door. Her mug slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. For a long moment, she couldn't move. The sound came again, deliberate, steady. She rose slowly, her fingers trembling as she reached for the doorknob. The hinges creaked open, and there he was. Victor stood in the doorway, drenched in morning light and streaked with dried blood. His suit was torn, his face bruised, but his eyes, those cold, guarded eyes, were alive. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Lena exhaled a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh, pressing a hand to her mouth. You're alive, he rasped, voice rough from smoke and exhaustion. Barely. Then Mateo was there, wide awake and running before she could stop him. Papa! Victor dropped to his knees, gathering the boy into his arms, burying his face in his son's hair. For the first time since she'd met him, Lena saw the armor fall away completely. No composure, no command, just a father holding the only thing that had ever mattered. I told you he'd come back, she whispered, crouching beside them. When Victor looked up, something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, guilt, love, all tangled together in one fragile moment. He reached for her hand. I shouldn't have doubted you. Her throat tightened. You almost got yourself killed. Almost, he said, managing a faint, crooked smile. But I couldn't die before I told you something. She shook her head, tears slipping free. Don't. He took her face gently between his hands, his touch rough and trembling. I love you, he said. No hesitation, no mask, no armor. I love you, Lena Moretti. You and my son. You're the only things that pulled me out of the dark. Her breath caught, every word sinking deep, undoing the wall she'd built to protect herself. She leaned into his touch, eyes glistening. You didn't need saving Victor, she whispered. You just needed someone to believe you could be. He closed his eyes, a quiet sound leaving him, part relief, part surrender. When he opened them again, there was no fear left, only peace. Outside, the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling gold across the cracked floorboards. Victor looked at the light, then back at her. It's over, he said softly. Torino's gone. The war's done. Lena nodded. Then maybe we finally get to start living. He smiled, faint, weary real. They stayed like that for a while. The 3 of them together, the city outside beginning to stir again, the danger fading into memory. For the first time since the river, the world felt still. And as the dawn light warmed the walls, Lena realized this was what she'd been diving toward all along. Not chaos, not tragedy, but this moment of quiet, fragile redemption. The war was over. But what came next? That was their story to write. The river was quiet again. A year had passed since that night of fire and gunfire, since the storm that had nearly swallowed everything she cared about. Now the same stretch of water that once churned with chaos lay, calm beneath the morning sun, the surface glinting like glass. Lena stood on the bridge, her hands resting on the railing, breathing in the salt-tinged air. The city was already awake behind her, taxis humming, vendors shouting, life pushing forward. But here, above the water, everything felt still. The memories came easily. The scream, the plunge, the cold that bit her lungs like knives. The boy's limp body in her arms. She had crossed this bridge a waitress, invisible and broke. Now, she crossed it a woman reborn. Behind her, the sound of laughter drifted through the wind. "Careful, Matteo," she called, turning just in time to see the boy darting toward the railing with a toy car clutched in his small hand. "I won't drop it this time," he promised, his grin bright and gap-toothed. Lena smiled, her heart swelling with something that still surprised her, joy that didn't ache anymore. She'd spent months rebuilding, learning to live without fear. With Viktor's help, though never under his shadow, she'd started the Moretti Foundation, a small program for at-risk youth along the waterfront. Kids who reminded her of herself, lost, overlooked, searching for something steady to hold on to. Viktor never took credit for it. His name appeared nowhere, though his money kept it alive. He said it was better that way, that some debts were meant to be repaid in silence. Now he stood a few feet away, leaning against the railing, the breeze tugging at his coat. The scars along his jaw had faded to faint lines, the darkness in his eyes softened by time. He watched Matteo toss pebbles into the water, his mouth curving into the faintest smile. "You're thinking too much again," Lena said, joining him. "I'm watching," he replied quietly. "Try to remember what peace looks like. You're doing better than you think." He glanced at her, eyes catching the light. "You sound sure." "I am." She slipped her hand into his, the motion as natural as breathing. "We made it this far. That has to count for something." For a while, they just stood there, the city moving around them, cars rumbling in the distance, gulls crying overhead, the slow rhythm of the water below. Then Viktor shifted slightly. His hand brushed his coat pocket, a small, almost uncertain gesture. Lena caught it instantly. "Don't," she said with a soft laugh. His brow lifted. "Don't what?" "Whatever you're hiding in there." She grinned, eyes warm. "I already know." He paused, studying her face, the way sunlight played against her hair. Then he smiled, not the measured, controlled one she'd seen 100 times before, but something rare, unguarded. "Do you?" She nodded. "And the answer's yes. It's been yes since the river." He exhaled, a sound somewhere between disbelief and relief. "You make it sound easy." "It wasn't," she said. "But it's real." Matteo ran up then, breathless, holding out a smooth white pebble. "Look, Mama, it's shaped like a heart." Lena knelt to take it, brushing her thumb over its cool surface. The word Mama still hit her every time. Soft, unexpected, perfect. "Then we'll keep it," she said. Viktor crouched beside them, resting a hand on Matteo's shoulder. The three of them stayed that way for a moment, framed by sunlight, the water shimmering behind them, the world finally quiet. Lena glanced down at the river one last time. The current moved slow, steady, unthreatening now. "Sometimes," she murmured, almost to herself, "the water takes." Viktor looked at her. "And sometimes," she smiled, turning toward him, "sometimes it gives. That day it gave me everything." The wind carried her words out across the river, where sunlight broke them apart and scattered them like gold. And for the first time in a long time, Lena Moretti knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. And that's how it all began, with one dive into cold water that changed 3 lives forever. Lena Moretti thought she was just saving a child. She didn't know she'd save a man's soul or find her own peace in the process. From waitress to survivor, from survivor to family. The river that once nearly drowned her became the place where everything started and where it all came full circle. Because sometimes fate doesn't knock. Sometimes it pulls you under just so it can teach you how to rise again. If you felt that story, don't forget to hit subscribe and join the family here on Mafia Soul, where every heartbeat hides a story and every story has a soul. Born in the shadows, told with heart. See you in the next video.